Hello and welcome to Susan Stanley Stitch in Time. I'm Susan and I'm so glad you're joining me today. I hope on this channel you find inspiration and encouragement as I typically talk about cross-stitch, quilting, textiles, sewing notions, and methods from the past. And we learn from those who have come before us. I also share with you my projects and the progress I've made. And this week will be a week that I am so excited to share with you. I have uncovered some really exciting things in my research and reading about early sewing and methods that were used, and I can't wait to share it with you. We're going to look at some FFOs, a new start. We'll take a peek at my WIPS. We're going to talk about another item for the work basket, and this is the thing that, anyway. As we explore how things were done in 1840 and typically what was involved in sewing. We're going to take another look at this quilt and answer some questions that you had about it, and then we'll take a peek at comments. So first up, I have an FFO, and that is Mary Snow. I received her back from the framer. I'm delighted with the frame. I think that the framer did an excellent job. The framer I used is Heidi from Heidi's Place. Take a screenshot of that. She will accept mail order. You can work it out with her if you want to mail something in, but as you know, if you've been following me, I've been attempting to find the best practices for finishing. And one of the things that I've always done with my textiles, my quilts, my cross stitch, is I've always wash and block them after they're finished. And I explained that in earlier episodes. In episode 28 and 29, I walk you through the whole process of how I prepared this piece for framing. I pinned and laced this myself and took it to Heidi, and you know, she said my methods were good and they are the methods that she would have used. My tension was off in this corner down here on the lacing, even though I had stitched a ground line all the way around so that it was going to be pinned on exactly the same thread all the way around on either side, because my eye would see if there was a gap, if there was a difference in the width, all the way from the edge of the stitching to the beginning of the frame, my eye would see that and it would drive me crazy. So that's just something really important to me. Even though I had done that, I pinned it, which was holding it in place. My tension on the lacing just down in this corner, and I think that was the last corner I went to. If you watch those earlier episodes, you can see what I did. And I ran into trouble, and she was great. I can't thank her enough. She's willing to walk me through this process next time, and she wants me to become, I won't be an expert like her. She's been doing it for 30 years, but I do want to understand the process, and I want to become better. I would like to be able to pin and lace my own items after I wash them, block them, pin them, lace them, and then take them to her for framing. So she's going to walk me through that, and she loosened up the tight spaces. Actually, what she did was she took it completely apart down to the bare bones and did it all over again for a very minimal fee. And anyway, I'm just super, super pleased. I love the choice of frame. I think, even though this is a small sampler, there's such an elegance to it. The swan possibly, or just the colors and the balance maybe set it off as kind of an elegant sampler. So I think this little tiny bit of gold really just enhances it. I tried frames without the gold because I don't tend to be a sparkly person, a sparkly girl. I don't tend to gravitate towards that, but this most definitely needed it, and it set it off beautifully. I'm really pleased with the little additions that I made. They make my heart happy to see Queen Elizabeth's initials here. I stitched this swan motif during her funeral. I added my initials in. I think that's all the personalization I did. Oh, I did put my name and the date into the area that's actually behind in the frame. So it's on the linen behind the frame. So if this is ever unearthed, who knows how many years from now, you'll know exactly who stitched it, and it's not an original. I used a Versoix Soie d'Alger on 40 count Lakeside linen vintage light exemplar. I'm very pleased with that combination. I would definitely repeat that. I am being really deliberate and kind of making notes of the combinations that work for me and make me really happy in the results. Anyway, I'm just thrilled, just so pleased. And I know a lot of people have finished this, and anyway, it's just so fun, and I can't wait to hang it up this weekend. So that's one fully finished object. And then the next item, you've seen this a few times on earlier episodes, and the episode called Cherries and Chocolate, and I will link the number below. I can't remember what it is. This quilt that so many of you have enjoyed, this brown and pink quilt, if you want to hear more about it, I will link the episode below that I talked about it. But I tried, I applied the binding, I stitched the binding on, I sewed the binding on by machine, and then hand stitched it to the back, which is kind of the traditional way of applying a binding. There's many ways to do a lot of things, but I used a Versoix Soie d'Alger to stitch the binding down by hand. I can't tell you what a fantastic experience that was. It was very durable, strong thread, and it just glides. It just glides through the fabric like smooth as silk, because it is silk. So anyway, that was another finish. Now, I do not typically enjoy putting on a binding because it's a lot of stitching, and I pretty much applique my bindings on. That's kind of the stitch I use. And I think, gosh, for all that applique, I should have something to show for it, like a beautiful motif on a block. But you know what? I do have something to show for it. I have a finished quilt that I can use, and all the details of this quilt are on that earlier episode. So it's been a fun journey, and I'm so glad it's fully finished. I have a new start, and I showed you a little bit about the materials that I'm using last time, but I started this by Mojo Stitches, Peace and Plenty, and New Year's Wish. Now I am adapting this. I'm going to switch out the birds and probably put my initials, and I'm probably not going to put Peace and Plenty, and I might not put the border on. That remains to be seen. But I saw Carolyn of the Attic stitching this, and I loved it because it reminds me of early black work, and it just looks lacy, and I have a plan. Anyway, everyone, when I visited the attic, was kind of exploring, of course, the higher counts, because you can't go into Jean's shop without doing that. And as I said last time, I have tried 60 count or 56 count, excuse me, and this time I wanted to try the uneven weave, the 5360. And I chose waffle cone, and I have a teeny tiny start. These are the two threads I'm using. I wanted to have two colors of red on the project. I love the way they look on the waffle cone. And there's my teeny, teeny, tiny start. And so a couple things with this. 5360 count it's an uneven weave, obviously. It's going to distort the image on the chart, but I wanted that to happen intentionally. And what I want to do, and I'm hoping, we'll see the end result. Pardon me. It's a rectangular shape, but I wanted it to be even more exaggerated rectangular shape. So I figured out that if I put the 53, with some help from the attic, by the way, if I put the 53 count, which is the side with the selvage, if I kept that on the bottom and had the 60 count threads on the vertical angle, it would elongate the image. Now let's see as I stitch this how that ends up. I really don't know. I have the measurements in inches of what this is going to end up like. We'll see, and we'll see if it's significant enough to warrant what I'm doing. I want to make a tiny pin keep, so it's going to be tiny, that's for sure. I don't know if you can see right here inside the bottom of the basket, I started doing the eyelet stitches. I believe they're eyelet. The chart is not super clear on what stitches to use where. It appears to be eyelets. And for the amount of effort that it takes to do eyelets in Swatch on 53, 60 count, I don't know if I'm super over the top about the results. I don't know if it's worth it. I'm going to try doing some crosses down in the corner and just see how that looks instead. It is a gorgeous effect on the chart on a larger count where you can really see the definition. This is so tiny, I don't know if it's going to really warrant that extra effort. Maybe, maybe not. So I know this doesn't look like much, but for me, now I have eye issues, which I'll talk about later. I have eye issues, and I have to say I was honestly flabbergasted at how I could see the holes in this linen. This linen is glorious. This linen would be gorgeous clothing or bedding, or it's just beautiful linen. I could see it to stitch it, and I think it's just the quality of the threads. They're very even. The threads themselves are very even. Anyway, it's just beautiful, and I'm really enjoying it. I used to kind of have to gird my loins to stitch on that 60 count because it was challenging. For some reason, I'm not feeling that way with this at all. Now I do have, of course, magnification, and I'm really, really glad I tried it, and I'm going to keep going. And you can see I have these threads here because the two colors, and I'm kind of working it, so I just tried to extend them. So anyway, I hope to make a little progress. I'm going to try to do a little more of a planned stitching rotation for the month. We'll see if I can stick with it because things come up, but I do want to spend a few days every month on this until it's done. I don't think I want to stitch it all the way through by itself. It is, I know it is a little bit tiring on my eyes, but not painful or difficult. Just a little more effort. You have to put in a little more concentration. Maybe that's the right word. Okay. Oh, and I'm using, like I said, Swatch and a number 12 short beading needle. And I know with quilting and other fiber arts that I've explored, tools are so important. Your needle is so important. And I don't think it's any different with cross stitch, embroidery, any kind of stitching you're doing. You really need the right tool. It really does make such a huge difference in your results. As far as my WIPS go, I decided, you know what, I had not given one of my earlier projects any attention for quite some time. I've been busy on other things that you're going to find out about really soon. And I hadn't done much applique, and that is just really peaceful for me, and I really enjoy it. So I pulled out my Civil War Bride block, and I'm almost finished with it. I just have a few things to tack down. Now, as you know, I typically use back basting, and for those of you who have asked and who are interested and curious, oops. But this time I used back basting, and I used my technique on stems, which I showed in an earlier video. I'll link that below if I can find it. It's way, way, way back. But for these feet and these leaves, I thought, you know, everyone's raving about a product and a technique called Appliquick. And I had it because I had been to Quilt Market years ago and received it. And I thought, I'm going to try it. I'm going to see. I don't typically like glues or adhesives. They aren't my go-to, my favorite thing. But I did use it for these feet, and I was able to get the shape and a smooth, they're not stitched down yet. So next time I'll show you up close, once they're stitched down, the effect. Now I could have spent a long time needle turning that, and believe me, I contemplated it, but you know what? I'm open to new things. So Appliquick is, and I was careful not to get any of that adhesive up against the edge because I do have to needle that edge to get that stitch to put them down. But anyway, I'm pleased, and I think I'm going to get another block ready, and I will add that to my rotation. I don't want to let that project go. I really want to finish that. And then of course Hannah Lancaster. She really is my focus piece. I'm stitching her on 38 count Fuller's Teasel by Legacy Linen. I'm using a Vera Soie d'Alger with my own conversion. So there's the threads. And I continued with the grass and the dress. I had to order another skein of the silk for the dress because this girl has, her dress is just huge, and I try to go back and forth between, you know, creating a new motif, outlining a new motif, and filling in the dress. And I really need to get to the motifs on the border. I want this bottom section done before I move up. So I'm trying to, like I've said before, work in 3 sections because it really is broken down into 3 sections. Now I might hate myself that I haven't gotten to some of the words in the top. And maybe when I finish that bottom section, I'll finish the border and then go back and forth between filling in the house and other things. But this is very comfort stitching. I think Carolyn, when I watched the attic latest video, she had a great description for this 38 count Legacy Linen. She said it has the comfort of 36 count, but the coverage of 40 count. And that's very true. I really agree with that, and I thought that was a great way to describe it. So Hannah has received some more attention from me. All right, this next thing I'm going to share with you, I really have been bursting to tell you about it. I don't know why this excites me so much, but I feel like I've just uncovered some archaeological mystery. This is probably knowledge that a lot of people already have, but it was so fun to discover it. So let me share with you a little more about early work baskets, specifically how silks in the 1840s were packaged for sale and for use in a work basket. So you know that in the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, I've talked about in 1840, the quality of the goods coming out of the mills, it was not quite as good as the homemade, things that were still made by hand or with hand looms and hand mechanized machines. And in many ways, the products were unusable, and people went back to the homemade ways. And silk fibers were still the preferred fiber for stitching and embroidery and fancy work, and a lot of piecing of even cotton fabrics. Cotton fibers were short, and they didn't hold up to the hand spinning and the twisting for a durable thread, a thread that wouldn't snap and break or shred or fall apart, with the methods that were available for production. So it was even difficult to wind the cotton into balls because it was so weak. And manufacturers didn't really know how even to merchandise this because they didn't really know what to call it because it wasn't really usable yet. So although cotton was cheaper and it was available, it was not used as often because it just didn't hold up. So silks and linens were the preferred threads. And I talked about work baskets in episode 32. And we looked at what was in a work basket. And I said during that episode that every woman, especially in the home, every woman, no matter if you were the lady of the house or a servant or somebody employed in service in the house, or if you were a farm wife, and everybody had a work basket because every sitting moment was taken up with needle and thread and mending and darning and maybe fancy work and patchwork and things like that. So it was just almost like a part of you, kind of like maybe our purses are today. I don't really know what to compare it to. Maybe our cell phones, because we always have those on her. So I first of all have to thank Melissa Roberts from the blog Two Threads Back. I've talked about her before. I will link her below. You really should pop over to her blog. She's entertaining and very fun to read, but she's done extensive research on all these topics, and I have to thank her for pointing me in this direction. And she's done invaluable research on it. So thread and embroidery silks during the 1840s was not sold on spools like we see it today. It was sold in twists, almost like a hank. And the question then becomes, how was it stored in a work basket? Because ladies typically didn't have a hank in their work basket. Well, so this was the exciting part that I uncovered. It was actually measured in 18-inch lengths, much like we do today when we're preparing our floss for hanging on floss drops. But it was instead stored in what was called thread papers. And these papers were long strips of paper that were accordion folded and sometimes decorated and placed in a basket. And so I'm going to show you. All right, so they would have a paper like this, and they would fold it in and then in half. And then one of these little sections was where the threads were placed. And here is my packet of thread papers. And you can see that there's a loop at the top, just like you would hang it from a floss drop. And the ends are out the bottom. And then I've tied this project's threads all together. And then this was then placed down into the work basket with all the other items that we've talked about before. Now, the paper was very unique because paper, everything, we have to go back. What was paper like back then? Well, a lot of times the paper that was used was copy paper out of a receipt book or some kind of a inventory that wasn't needed anymore. But one of the papers that was used during the 1840s was paper called laid paper. And laid paper has some special qualities, but before I get into that, I have to say that if you go to Melissa's blog and read about thread papers, you're going to read so many fun excerpts from literature that talk about the ladies and their thread papers and the ladies winding their threads for their thread papers. And it's just kind of mentioned in casual conversation while another element of the storyline is going on. And it's talked about so much that one quote, a gentleman says that the French ladies can do it in their sleep, meaning winding thread papers. I thought that was really cute. So what is it about this paper, this laid paper? Well, it was made in the 1840s, and during that time it was made, it's firm and it folds easily. It has a lot of body. It has slight indentations and kind of a watermark effect. Sometimes it actually did have a watermark. I'm not sure if this will show, but there are actually lighter lines spread across the paper. And so this is actually a piece of laid paper, and I've been able to source some so that I could create these thread papers like the original. And the paper was made using molds, and it was the perfect length for making thread papers. It's 9 inches tall, and this is half a sheet. So I made a short video showing you how to prepare your silk threads for an 1840s work basket, and I'm going to insert that in right here. Okay, so this is really exciting. I was so excited to learn this. This is an antique sample, and I think you've seen this before. And then this is my version of folded papers. And I'm going to show you today how that was done. So if you have a piece of laid paper, it looks like this. This one has some folds that I've already made, but you're going to fold it in half, and then you're going to cut it right on that center fold line. Now this paper has so much body, it's wonderful to work with. So you're going to cut that in half, and you'll end up with a piece that looks like this. This is half of the paper. You're going to cut it the length. All right, and you're going to take that half and you're going to fold it in half. And I like to use a boning tool to just get a nice crisp fold. All right, so you've got it and it's folded in half. And now we're going to take the lengthwise wide edges and fold those to the center. I'm going to take that and fold it in. And take this and fold it in. Okay, and now our paper, and we fold it again in the middle. So we fold it to the middle, fold to the middle, and then fold the middle in half. And now our paper is ready. Okay? So the paper's ready, and now this is something that if you prepare floss drops, this is exactly the same process. This is by R&R Woodworksy, but you can use any piece of wood or a ruler or anything that you like to wrap with. And you take your floss, take it off the spool, and I like to hold it in the middle, and this is exactly what we do today. And you wrap it, and it can go. It's on the floor now, but it doesn't matter. And you just wrap it and keep going around as many times as you want. If you want to use the entire spool or the entire amount, that's fine. I'm going to stop right there. So I'm going to stop right where I started. And now I'm going to cut where that piece was initially right here. I'm going to cut right there where they meet. And I'm just going to grab it from the back and pick it up. Oops, I guess I didn't do a very good job cutting that, did I? Okay, and we're going to keep that loop and just gently massage these together. I'm going to lay that down. And I'm going to open one side of my thread paper right here. And I'm going to lay the threads inside with the loop at the top. So it looks like that. And then I'm going to fold that outer edge on the same crease that I used to the middle. So it looks like that. Make sure your threads are only on this side of the center fold. And you have a thread paper. You can put it in your 1840's work basket. Isn't that neat? I love it. All right, so now you're probably all saying, well, I want to make thread papers for my 1840's work basket, or at least to have, because I think they're so cool. I am, like I've been saying, I have a website coming very, very soon, and I am going to offer packets of laid paper so that you can create your own thread papers if you'd like to do that. I think my next project that I kit up, I'm going to kit up using thread papers. Now, what is so genius about thread papers is that your silk is protected. Excuse me. Your silk is protected in this paper, and it's not rubbing up against the other silk or other things in your work basket or your project bag. It is also extremely easy to pull a thread out the top, just like you do when you're using a floss drop. So it's the early floss drop. I've also created a tiny rubber stamp that will go on the thread papers that says the color, the brand, the color, and the number. And that's on the second fold so that you can see that and access the correct threads. So anyway, I was so excited about this when I learned about it. I couldn't stand it. So then I had to go hunting because I wanted to see a real life antique example, and I did find, I just bought one, but I did find an old packaged thread paper that would have been purchased at a store. So eventually, after people were wrapping and wrapping and wrapping their threads off of a hank, eventually somebody got the idea, and maybe it was this company first, I don't know, I haven't found that out yet, to package them in the papers ready to go. And it shows you exactly how to pull the thread out for use. So thank you for joining me on that. It was such a fun revelation. I was just over the moon when I discovered and learned more about it and actually tried it for myself. So you might be wondering why I have the same quilt here again that I shared with you last time. Well, I had so many comments on this quilt, and I realized there were several things that I didn't include in last week's video that I thought, you know, it's worth bringing it out again and talking about it one more time. I have to say, I had such a response on the idea of doing a talk on the intersection of baskets across textiles, cross-stitch, samplers, quilts, the historic and antique versions, and the meaning and kind of how those basket shapes have changed and developed over the years. That is a bit of an undertaking, and I'm thrilled to do it, but I am not going to be able to do it immediately. But believe me, that is on the back burner, and I'm gathering information and sources, so that will be coming soon. It seems like baskets, they warm my heart. They must warm a lot of people's hearts, and anyway, so people really enjoyed the idea of a basket theme. So What would I have done differently on this quilt? That was one thing I really wanted to share with you. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how every project you do is kind of a stepping stone in your journey. And this quilt was done in 2013, and now 10 years later, looking back, my style has changed a little bit. My knowledge and probably I would call it my artistic sense, or just my ability to look at fabrics a tiny bit differently than I did 10 years ago. Every project you put down and you walk away from, whether it's finished or not, when you come back to it, even if it's just been a short amount of time, you look at it with fresh eyes. You have a different perspective. It's almost like you've cleansed your palette, your visual palette. And so sometimes you see a new direction and a new attempt or a way to improve on what you've done. And if it's an incomplete project, there have been incomplete projects that I've abandoned and shared with a newer stitcher or quilter, because they're starting their journey and they're just learning technique, and they're not as maybe into, there's so many layers to what we do. There's the threads, the techniques, just the whole process. So I feel really good about that. I don't feel any remorse, and I don't have a compulsion to finish things if I've lost my love for them, or if I feel like I've turned into a different direction. But that's just me. The project may have taught you everything that you need to know. You've gotten to a point in it, and I just want to encourage you, if you are struggling to work through a project that you don't like anymore, or that you really feel like you should have changed directions on, it's okay. You have learned something. It's not a waste. In my opinion, it's not a waste. You've learned something, you've gained a skill, you've gained a new set of eyes, a new way of looking at things. So on this quilt that I'm calling William Morris Meets the 19th Century, I learned a lot, and it was my first experience really appliquing on a dark background and playing with color on a dark background and looking at what absorbs into the dark background and what shines through. And I didn't want everything to absorb into the dark background. I wanted things to pop out. Therefore, I used some colors, really strong colors, that I might have softened down a second time around, or instead of using almost a solid, I would have used a patterned fabric and kind of created a little more interest in that way. I learned in this project to embrace colors that when they stand alone are not my favorite. There are some colors in this quilt that I love now because I know what they do when they're combined with other colors. But initially I would look and say, wow, I don't know about that color. But now I know about that color, and I wouldn't use it probably intensely. One of those colors I would say is kind of this mustardy green, which I've learned to love and appreciate for what it does to a quilt or a set of threads for a cross stitch or sampler project. It's what they do to the whole. So you have to look at the color and the floss or the fabric as a single, but then you also have to look at it as what it does to the whole. And so this project really taught me to stand back, look at it as the whole. I was really beginning, like I said last time, to adventure into using more patterned fabrics. And we don't really necessarily have that option with cross stitch and threads unless you're using variegated, but you do in using different textured threads, using maybe a Goblin's and a 103 and a Swatch. You're going to get a lot of texture and variety of dimension in your stitching if you do that. Now, I don't do that a lot yet, and I might venture into that, who knows. And then I was really I was discovering the intensity and the beauty of the color black. I love black, and I loved it then, and I still love it now. And I don't use it as much now. I use more deep dark chocolate brown, but so that was another thing that I discovered while stitching this project. I didn't show you. I did show you the label, but I didn't show you the back. I did something kind of different to the back. I used some of the leftover elements, and that's the other thing. I probably wouldn't have pooled all the similar colors together. Maybe would have spread them out, and if they were patterned, it wouldn't have looked as chaotic. I think I pulled them together and kept them in groups because it was getting really busy. Anyway, I'm going to show you. I'm going to pop in a picture of the back, and then we'll move on to comments. I always love receiving your comments. I'm excited to see what you have to say and to hear from you and what you've been discovering and uncovering. And I have a short list, and I'm going to start sharing week by week some of the resources that have come in and that do regularly come in. Now, one of them is time sensitive, and that's why I'm sharing it today. I received a comment from a viewer, and she suggested I pop over to a lecture by the Met Museum, and it was on 1840 Swatch Books. Now, you might be saying, what in the world is a swatch book? Well, a swatch book was a book that contained little snippets of fabric, either that a person had created themselves out of fabrics they'd used to clothe their family, and they wanted to keep a swatch and a record. Maybe they would write next to it, Aunt Millie's dress, or, wedding gown. So these are specifically swatch books of fabrics that were being manufactured in 1840. And some of them are actually manufacturing swatch books where they show all the color lines and the fabrics that were available by a certain manufacturing company. I'm going to link the video below. It's eye candy for sure. I hope to get to the Met and see these in real life. But if you're at all interested in textiles from this time period, which I'm kind of focusing on this year, well, I am focusing on this year, you'll definitely want to pop on over and watch it. I believe it goes down off their website June 7th, so you might want to pop over there pretty soon. So I mentioned earlier that I'm stitching on this 5360 count, and that I have had eye troubles, and I want to let you know that if you followed me, I had eye troubles a little over a year ago, and I have now new eye troubles in the other eye, similar, that are going to probably require I'm looking at a series of 3 surgeries potentially, and I'm being monitored closely by the surgeon, and things are very I can't predict or really set any time for anything because my eye is so unstable. So I'm not going to be traveling for the rest of this year. I'm hunkering down and just getting through this. If I appear on a video and you don't see my face, I'll let you know I've had surgery. And anyway, just wanted to make people aware, things, all my exciting announcements, all these things that I'm working on are just a tiny bit shifted because I'm dealing with this health challenge. All right, but I will be launching a website, and it will be really soon, and I will keep you posted on Instagram if it happens before my next video. On the website there will be Lou & Sue products. We have some of those. They haven't gone dark. They are definitely still alive and well. And there will be some other things that I am so excited to share with you. Like I will offer some laid paper so you can create thread papers if you'd like. I am offering Mary Brutnell kits, finishing kits. I'm still waiting for some of the threads to come in before I can package these up. And many of you have already contacted me saying you want one. And as soon as I get the kits together, I will contact you directly and let you know that they are available. Other than that, there will be a few left on the website. If you are interested in that and you want to let me know, great. If you're interested and you're anxiously waiting, go to Hedgerow Stitching. Rebecca of Hedgerow Stitching is the woman who charted this. She's a friend. She charted this beautiful little marking sampler, and it is a PDF download. So that will not be included in the kit. You will have to access that on your own from Rebecca at Hedgerow Stitching, and I will link that below. The kit will include the threads because we are approximating an experience of a little girl stitching in 1840. So the threads are Gobelins. This is a 30 count linen, and you will have this backing fabric and the binding fabric and the ribbon to tie up your marking sampler roll for your work basket. All right, stay tuned. I have more exciting things to share with you. I love all the wonderful comments, and again, thank you for those of you who have shared other links and important things. I haven't forgotten them. They're waiting, and they will have their turn, and I will share them with everybody else. Until I see you next time, make time for stitching. Bye, friends.